Hello, everyone. Welcome to Training Tuesday for the Evergreen Indiana Library Consortium. Today we're going to talk about how to test software features. My name is Ruth Frasur. I'm the training coordinator for the Evergreen Indiana Library Consortium and also the coordinator for the Evergreen Community Development Initiative, or ECDI. The ECDI is a member organization of libraries and library consortiums with the purpose of pooling resources to identify and facilitate the development of features and fixes in the Evergreen library software. Before we go too far into this, it's important to state very explicitly that Evergreen Integrated Library System, or ILS, is open source software. So anything that I talk about today is going to be related to the development of open source software. Open source is a model for development that relies on transparency, collaboration, and community to produce software that does what the end users need. Oftentimes, open source software solutions are free in terms of the actual applications, but this often means free like free puppies, not free like free beer. There may be costs associated with hosting, supporting, and developing special features for the free software. I've included this tree here to show you some other open source projects. Some you may be familiar with, some you may not. You see the WordPress logo in there, and GIMP, which is one of my favorites. There are many in here that I'm familiar and some that I'm not, so you may recognize some that I don't. And then I've also included one that wasn't included there, the little elephant, which is for Postgres or PostgreSQL, however you want to say it, which is the database software that we use as part of this. Linus Torvald is a computer scientist from Finland, and I learned a little bit about him as I was preparing this. He is the principal driving force behind the development of Linux, which is an open source operating system that has spawned many, many variations for many use applications over the years. Linus said, in open source, we feel strongly that to really do something well, you have to get a lot of people involved. And that's exactly what Evergreen Indiana and the Evergreen project want to do. It's easy to forget sometimes, for me at least, and I suspect for anyone who is just doing their job on a daily basis, that Evergreen Indiana is part of a much larger project. Our consortium is one of a large group of organizations around the world leveraging the power, flexibility, scalability, and collaborative environment of the Evergreen ILS. Tim O'Reilly is the founder of O'Reilly Media. He's a premier publisher of computer books throughout the world. Some of you may recognize O'Reilly Media as one of the imprints that comes on the books that you include in your collections. He popularized the term open source. Tim O'Reilly said, empowerment of individuals is a key part of what makes open source work, since in the end, innovations tend to come from small groups, not from large, structured efforts. Hopefully, this webinar will be a step toward empowering you as an individual to participate in new ways to help make Evergreen better. We're going to first go through some baseline terminology. This list is not exhaustive, but will hopefully provide you with the language tools to make the rest of the class more meaningful. This also seems like an appropriate time to say that if at any point things start to sound like Greek or some other language you don't know, or you need something clarified, or you just have a question about anything, please use the chat box or the Q&A tool to let me know. I'm monitoring both of those and will get to those as soon as I see them. I just absolutely love this. If any of you have seen Bones, you'll recognize the "what's that mean" kid. The first term that we're going to talk about is a bug. You have likely heard this. It was, a bug is a flaw or a glitch in a system. Thomas Edison reported bugs in his design, but the first computer bug was an actual bug, a moth, that caused the Mark II Acon relay computer at Harvard to malfunction. The incident was recorded in Grace Hopper's logbook in 1947, along with the actual moth, which was taped to the page. You can actually view it at the Smithsonian while it's on display, which it is not right now. A ticket is a way to document that a bug has been identified and to track progress that is made to address the bug. Launchpad, which if you've been around me at all when we're talking about development, you've probably heard me use that phrase, that word. It's a website that's used by the Evergreen community for organizing the many different types of tickets that are submitted. We will take a brief journey on the internet to look at Launchpad later on. Another term that you will definitely encounter when you are involved with testing is Concerto. Concerto is a data set that was initially created with major support from the Berklee School of Music to be used when testing the Evergreen library software. It contains bibliographic and user records for both staff and patrons so that real-life scenarios can be replicated on test servers to see if new features or feature updates actually work. A feature, as defined by the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, you do not have to remember that part, is a distinguishing characteristic of a software item. Features have also been described as the tools you use within a system to complete a set of tasks or actions. There is not necessarily a specific criteria for something to be called a feature. It is a concept, and so we use it pretty loosely and it can be a little fuzzy. The next term, requirements. When we talk about requirements, we begin to take the first real steps toward developing a new feature or major update to an existing one. Requirements are, or can be, a concise description of what you want to be able to do. You must be able to accurately and as realistically as possible describe what you require a feature to help you do so that developers and programmers can translate those requirements into the next piece of the development puzzle, the specifications. Specifications are generally contained in some type of document and explain how the feature is going to be built. Requirements are generally created by someone who wants something. Specifications are generally created by someone or someones who are going to build the thing that's wanted. Now we're going to take a look at the general process of software development. Please keep in mind that in any given project, there may be subtle or not so subtle differences in this process. Also keep in mind that this refers to the open source development cycle. In some projects, the steps may be very well defined and orderly. In other projects, there may be a little more fuzziness in terms of going back and forth between the steps. As with just about anything with software, the first step to fixing a problem is identifying that it exists. A problem may be identified as something that is broken, but it could also be something that doesn't work as expected, or maybe the way it works is inefficient, or we might just wish something existed or was different. The first step often presents itself in the form of complaints. I say this because it can be really easy to ignore the content of a complaint simply because someone's tone or demeanor might be annoying. I know I'm guilty of sometimes just tuning out the complaints unless it's something I can fix myself. I would encourage you to approach those complaints both from yourself and from others from the perspective of identifying bugs. This can be in anything. It could actually be in the Evergreen software, but complaints can also contain bugs in the overall scheme of society too. Let's go back to the software. After a bug is identified, the next step is deciding what would represent a solution. From this, we develop a set of requirements. I very purposefully am not saying that we determine how to fix the bug. How to fix the bug is decided by those who will actually write the code to build the fix, whether it's a new feature, an updated workflow, or a patch. This is one of those fuzzy parts in this life cycle and happens somewhere between determining the requirements and the next step, which is the actual development of the fix or feature. Remember, we said there are requirements and specifications, and the specifications kind of fall right in between both having the requirements for addressing the bug determined and the fix or feature being developed. Once a fix or feature is developed, we really see the collaborative community aspects of open source on full view. The code for that fix or feature is made available for review and testing. Depending on the project, there may be multiple rounds of testing, first with a small group such as the ECDI or another contracting agency, and then the larger public community. Finally, after testing, fixing any problems, conversation, and more testing, a fix or feature is marked with something called a pull request, meaning that it's ready to be considered for inclusion in the master version of the software. It then goes through either a feedback fest or a bug squashing week, or in some cases both, in some cases neither. The Evergreen project is in the midst of a feedback fest, which happens about twice a year. So we're going to take a quick look and see what's actually going on right now. Make sure that you can see that. Lovely. So this is the spreadsheet for the feedback fest right now, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about the things that you see here, but I'd like you to take note of column A, which says test server, and you can see we have a variety of those as we scroll down. And I'm going to link out in just a second, but then we can also see the different bugs that people are testing and seeing if they're ready to be signed off to go into the software. So I'm going to actually click on Terran's test server here. And so this is, oh, I see. I'm going to actually do this. She has it linked so it goes to the OPAC, but we can just change that out and then we can go to, let's see if this will let me. Well, it's not going to let me log in there. I may not be able to log in as admin, but using the Concerto logins here, then I would be able to actually log in there, and she just must not have the admin set up, so I'm not going to spend much time doing that. We'll go back here. But you can see there's a whole list of test servers as well as tickets or bugs that have been loaded on there for testing. And so we go through this entire cycle. We get something that then goes into the master software, and the cycle continues. Evergreen, Indiana, and the Evergreen project rely on the involvement of individuals to provide feedback and expertise in every aspect of the ILS software development. As you saw in the feedback fest spreadsheet, several individuals are working on testing those features right now, and I do want to go back and just highlight that to you. You can see up here in the corner that we have 18 people right now who are in here either paying attention to what's going on in the spreadsheet, actively testing, but are involved in the Feedback Fest right now, and I'm going to actually close this so I'm not counted, so we'll say 17. At some point in the next couple days, I'll also be one of those individuals hoping to get as many tickets addressed as possible. So now let's get into what exactly you need to test, need to help test, which is the point of this. I'm going to assume, especially since you're here, that you have an internet connected computer of some sort, and this could be a PC, a Mac, tablet, a smartphone, or whatever hardware you access Evergreen with. Now we're going to talk about the other things you need besides the computer. The first thing that you need are the requirements. Again, this may be a specific document stating exactly what the requirements are, or the requirements might be vaguely laid out in a Launchpad ticket. But you need to know what is being developed, and you need to know what it's supposed to do. It could be functionality, it could be a change in appearance, it could be any number of things, and so you'll need to read to find that out. The next thing that you need are the specifications. This, as mentioned, can be a fuzzy thing depending on the project. In some cases, the specifications may be a specific document, or they may be part of an IRC conversation among developers. You don't need to know exactly how something is being built, but you do need to have some level of understanding of what it is supposed to do and how it's supposed to do it. The specifications are what the developer has agreed to build, and so you need to have some understanding of what that actually is. The next thing that you need is to know the modes of communication for the project. You're going to pay attention to who and how you should communicate over the course of the test window. That's going to vary depending on what type of project you're working on. For ECDI testing teams, we use an email list and multiple Google documents. For some other test projects, that varies. For instance, for the Feedback Fest, we rely on the spreadsheet as well as Launchpad tickets to document things there, and then we may just be communicating through various chat channels and email and things as well. So know what the mode of communication for the specific project you're working on is. The next thing that you need is to know your test environment. We don't test on the production software because a lot of times it involves loading, well, it always involves loading software bits that we're not sure how they're going to impact the software, and it would be terrible to load the thing and break it for all of Evergreen, Indiana, or some other organization. As you saw in the Feedback Fest spreadsheet, special servers have been loaded with those different bits of software to be tested. The next thing that you will need to know about is how to submit any issues that may arise as you are testing. Again, this goes back to the communication. It's intricately related to the communication, but it's a kind of a subset of that. How are you relaying the information to your other testers, to the testing coordinator, or whatever, so that those issues can be addressed? If you have submitted a help desk ticket for Evergreen, Indiana, you know the basics for this. It comes down to providing as much information as possible about the scenario in which you tested. So what was your login? What was your workstation? What were you trying to do? What did you expect to have happen? What actually happened? What are the barcodes that may be associated with that, etc. So that would be one thing. Or another way to do that is if it wasn't necessarily something was broken or not as expected, it could just be something more like a wish list where you say, I wish it had done this. So, but you'll need to know the mechanism for that project. And if you don't, it goes back to the communication. There should always be the freedom to ask. And the last thing that you need is something that I wish that I had called follow through, but it's not really a thing. It's maybe a character thing. The last piece should be follow through, though, rather than verifying fixes. After an issue is addressed, testers need to go back to the test environment and make sure that the fix actually fixed the thing. So you don't need to have a special piece of equipment apart from a computer that's connected to the internet. You don't need to have, I'm not even sure what you might be envisioning that you would need to have for that. These are the things that you really need to know. And from my experience, most people have most of these already, except for the test environment, but they give that to you. The other thing that I believe is imperative to this is getting to know your colleagues. And so I put this in here. This was from 2018, which was the last international conference that I had been to, but you may recognize several of these faces. These are individuals from Evergreen, Indiana, who were also there in St. Charles, Missouri for the international conference. It is a great thing to be in any environment, especially in an uncomfortable or unusual environment, and to be there with colleagues who may either remember or or also be experiencing the same anxieties and worries that you are. The more you do this, the more you will become accustomed to it, and it will become your environment instead of being you in someone else's environment. The other thing to remember is that, and I'm saying this from my firsthand experience, that it is a good thing to have people of varied experience as well as expertise together. There was a point where I thought that all of this development stuff was for all of those development people. And it took some time and some perspective for me to understand that there is no one in this shared enterprise that does not bring value to it. Even if they have only been on the job for a week, maybe they are not even on the job. Maybe they are an enthusiast, or it may be somebody who's been on the job for 40 years and could be very resistant to or very welcome to change and different types of development as far as library services go. There is no one in this shared enterprise that does not bring value to it. Here's some things that you don't need to help develop. I just wanted to put this up here. You don't have to be trained in software engineering, computer science, IT support, database architecture, etc., to help test software. You will learn as you go. Just the basics will do. Read, comprehend, observe, compare, describe. Those are the things that you need to do. And those are not always, and oftentimes are not even part of, education. Albert Einstein, who is famously pretty smart, said, "I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious." The other thing that you don't need to have to test is experience. Experience comes from doing. In open source, and specifically as we talk about the Evergreen ILS, and even more specifically as we talk about Evergreen Indiana's version of the ILS, there is a need to have end users test the features that will be used in their own libraries and other libraries around the world. Benjamin Franklin I don't know that he's as quite a renowned genius, but he's pretty renowned. He's pretty smart too. Tell me and I forget. Teach me and I remember, hopefully. Involve me and I learn. That's a pretty basic thing that most of us already know anyway. Hands-on is the way to learn. The other thing that came to mind, because I have heard this insinuated in conversations, the other thing that you don't need are connections. Now, I'm going to qualify that as we go through, but we've all experienced this. We've wanted to do something, but it seemed like only people who got special invitations or had special friends got to participate. To get involved with testing, you don't need to learn some super secret handshake, go through some initiation, or figure out if you are somehow related to the lead developer on a project. You will make connections and they will be meaningful, but anyone and everyone is invited and encouraged to participate in the Evergreen community and with the development of the Evergreen software. Fana Bonta, who was in Beastmaster, if any of you are familiar with that, said popularity is not an indication of quality. Taking the step to participate in your first testing project can be intimidating. I've included this picture because it represents one of my first steps. I'm sure it can probably be interpreted in many different ways based on this topic, but for me, it has a very specific meaning. In 2013, I attended my first full Evergreen International Conference in Vancouver, British Columbia. I took this picture while visiting Stanley Park, which was within walking distance of the hotel and convention center. I attended the conference utilizing a scholarship offered by the Evergreen Indiana Consortium after being encouraged to try again after what I considered a terrible experience at the 2012 Evergreen International Conference in Indianapolis. It was terrible because I felt completely lost and out of my depth. Thanks to the encouragement of others, I did try again, and this time connected with some of my colleagues from Indiana and also met new people. I listened a lot, and I did not understand a lot of what I heard, but I started to recognize faces and vocabulary, and pieces began to come together to form ideas in my mind. Fast forward to today in 2020, and now I am encouraging you to get involved in testing software for this, and it is a core part of my actual job. Evergreen ILS is a 1,000-mile journey, maybe a 5,000-mile journey. It is a continually evolving software solution driven by a continually evolving community of practitioners from incredibly diverse backgrounds with all levels of expertise and engagement. So this is the part of the class where I get to go off script a little and hopefully just encourage you. I've presented you with some pretty big technical concepts, maybe, and I know it can be overwhelming. Being overwhelmed is the #1 reason that people don't participate. They have too much going on, they don't know enough, they don't think their feedback is insightful enough to matter. So let's take a step back and talk about how, with Evergreen, you get to pick what you participate in. I call this the self-care route because it's a way to acknowledge that taking the first or even the 50th step can be intimidating. As you are looking at participating in testing, in the development aspect of the Evergreen software, in looking at new features that are specifically for Evergreen Indiana, the first thing that I tell myself to do, because I still get overwhelmed by this as well, is to reflect. Know yourself and where your interest lies. Each one of you has a specific or a set of specific interests when it comes to Evergreen. You may utilize a lot of the software, but there are things within it that pique your curiosity, that when somebody says, what's your favorite feature, you go to. Somebody says, what's your least favorite feature, you go to. Know yourself and know what those things are. Then also examine yourself and your strengths. There is a tendency among librarians, and I'm going to say this and make this very general statement. It's not just librarians, but we are in a library setting, to look at ourselves and see, first of all, what we're not good at, and then to see the things that we wish we were good at, and then to almost apologize for the things that we are good at. This reflection is a conversation with your own self, and you don't need to be ashamed by telling your own self that you are good at something. Honestly, you don't need to be ashamed by telling somebody else you're good at it, but this is reflection. So examine yourself and identify your strengths. Then breathe. Facing new experiences and opportunities can be overwhelming. It is often overwhelming. For some people, it is always overwhelming. I need to tell you that I cannot count the number of times I have talked to groups of people, and every single time I have a stomach ache beforehand. And that's including today, where I don't see your faces and I don't see anybody picking up their phone and I don't hear whispers in the back of the room. Every single time I get a stomach ache. And I still like talking to you all. What a strange thing. Take a deep breath and don't forget to exhale. And if you need to take another deep breath and don't forget to exhale, do that as well. The next is connect. Identify your allies and champions. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, you have already identified both one ally and one champion for you. So this is one of my strengths. I am your ally. I don't necessarily know what for yet, but if you need one, I am there. And I am most assuredly your champion. So you have at least one. Then be someone else's ally and or their champion. You get to pick this as well. So this is a very self-centered, without being selfish, enterprise. And then finally, stretch. Definitely go for the easy win, but then go for the win where you might fail. And then embrace failure as a valuable experience. In fact, well, this is my thing. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. I look forward to failing, not for the pain of the failure, because let's not sugarcoat it. There is pain in failure, but for the after. After the failure, what do I get to pull from that experience and make my own and learn from that? So that is my self-care route to picking your projects that you want to participate when it comes to testing for development. Let's take a fairly quick look at some recent and ongoing projects. Almost everybody here, I'm going to assume everybody here, but then I'm going to leave room for maybe that one person that is not familiar with the mobile app that Anna worked really hard with Ken Cox, who had previously developed the Hemlock app for Android devices, and then with the initiative of Evergreen Indiana, he built out the app for the iOS devices as well and customized it for Evergreen Indiana. As part of this project, and some of you may have been involved in it, and some of you, and it may be possible that none of you were, there was testing that went here. When Ken said, okay, we're ready, and then the testers went in and said, oh, but what about this? Oh, that's not working as expected. And then even after that, and I'm almost positive that at least half of you in here realized that the software works, but then a bug that showed up were your library hours. And so then tickets were submitted for that. And that is part of this whole process as well, identifying the bug, figuring out what the requirements are, and then having that fixed. Another ongoing project has been the web client, and this is the main body of the staff interface. So I don't want to say it's the main body of the software, because there is a lot of stuff underneath it all that makes sure that this interface shows up the way that you want it to. But there are constantly new features and updates being made to existing interfaces, new interfaces being added, new functionality, differing functionality, that all of those things are things that require testing from individuals. A very exciting thing in the Evergreen project community right now is the OPAC redesign. This is something that Chris Burton from Niagara Falls Public Library has been working on for a long time. And now it is to the point where there are several individuals and organizations that are participating in the further development. And this is one of the large features that is in the feedback fest right now, and will hopefully be signed off and go into master so that it would be available down the road for us in Evergreen, Indiana as well. And you see here just a picture of what the new My Account summary looks like, and you can see it has some significant differences from the current My Account that we see. So then the next thing is how to get involved. There are a variety of ways. I said before that we are a member of the ECDI, Evergreen, Indiana is. You can participate through the forums. And so I'm going to link out here. If you are interested in participating, I'll go back to that, there is a form to fill out and to request access to. Okay, well, there is a forum there, and I was actually just there recently, and I'm going to need to fix that. But where you can go in and you can discuss issues that you have with the software. And so there is the link to this access request form here, and that then I will get you access to the forum so that you can participate in those conversations. And then there are a variety of other things that you can do as well. So Anna is very good about sending information out when there is something that is being specifically developed for Evergreen, Indiana. And generally that is through an email list asking for help with testing, and then giving information about that. So keep your eye on those lists. And I also recommend, if you can, to observe the executive committee meetings as well as the cataloging committee meetings and patron services, because that's often where a lot of conversation about locally developed things happen there. Plus, it's just good to know what's going on. The other thing, and I'm going to actually pop out to there in just a second, is to register for a Launchpad account. And so you can, this is just a screenshot of what the Launchpad website looks like, and I'm not going to spend time to explain it all, but picking through there is definitely worth it. It's pretty easy to at least get your bearings, even if you aren't ready to participate yet. And even if you don't know what everything means, there's still fun things to click through, and it's pretty hard to break. Let me pop back through there. Yeah, I think it's the way that I'm logged in, Lynn. So you can register for an account there. It's going to, if you click register, it's going to take you to the Ubuntu site where you will register for a single sign-on account, which is how you register for Launchpad. It also works for other places that use that one sign-on. The next way that you can participate in testing is to join an ECDI testing team. Depending on what projects we have going on, the ECDI will call on people who have volunteered to test for those projects to actually get in and do that. So here you can see the form for that. You select your organizational affiliation, and you can see down the list there's Evergreen, Indiana. And then you can select one or more of the testing team interests that you have and submit that, and then you will get a communication from me saying what's next. We've talked a little bit already about Feedback Fest, and we looked at the spreadsheet. And then the next thing that you can do is participate in the Hackaway. As a beginner, this is really best as an informational thing, and one of the nice things about this year, and I say nice thing as qualified nice, is that because of COVID, the decision has been made to have this as a virtual event. Generally, it's in person. But as a virtual event, you'll have the opportunity to observe the conversations and see what goes on there. Right now, we have a planning document up on the wiki that we use for the Evergreen community. And you can get a little bit more information about what we are planning to see. We have a virtual Thai takeout dinner, which doesn't have anything to do whatsoever with developing, but it does have to do with connecting. So that should be fun. All those different ways that you can participate in there. So now I'd like to know what questions you have.